The Price of Gold Dust Part 1. I came to Canada with $50, a half-broken phone, and a backpack full of desperation. The plane landed in Toronto on a cold February night. I remember my breath fogging up the window as we descended, the lights below twinkling like stars trapped on the ground. I had never seen a city that big before. Back in my village in northern Iran, we had more goats than cars. But I didn't come all this way to count headlights. I was 26, scared, and completely alone. My cousin Reza was supposed to meet me at the airport. He never showed up. I waited by the arrivals gate for almost 3 hours, until security told me I had to leave. I didn't have roaming, didn't know how to use the payphones, and barely spoke enough English to ask for directions. So I walked. That first night, I slept in the corner of a parking garage, curled up against a concrete wall with my backpack for a pillow. I told myself it was just temporary. It had to be. The first few weeks were the worst. I bounced between shelters, picked up scraps of work wherever I could. Construction, dishwashing. One time, I stood in a chicken costume, handing out flyers for a fast food chain. I laughed about it later, but at the time, I felt like my soul was dissolving into the pavement. It took me 5 months to save enough to rent a basement room in Scarborough. It was barely a room, more like a closet with a mattress on the floor. The walls sweated in summer, froze in winter. But it was mine. That meant something. My break, if you could call it that, came by accident. I was working at a computer recycling warehouse. One day, while sorting through a bin of discarded laptops, I found an old MacBook that still turned on. It had no password, no encryption. Just files. Dozens of documents. Notes, emails, spreadsheets. Most of it looked like junk. But one folder caught my eye. It was labeled Crypto Tests. Now, I didn't know much about Bitcoin back then, but I'd heard rumors. A few guys at the shelter had been talking about it. Digital gold. Money you couldn't touch. Some thought it was a scam. Others said it was the future. I opened the folder. Inside were private keys, wallet backups, long strings of code I didn't understand. But I copied them anyway onto a USB stick I kept hidden in my sock. It felt stupid, like stealing trash. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I went to the library and used one of the public computers to search how Bitcoin wallets worked. One of the addresses had over 300 BTC in it. At the time, Bitcoin was worth around $900 each. I did the math. $270,000. Sitting in a folder in a junked laptop. No password. No two-factor. Nothing. I couldn't sleep for days. I didn't touch the coins for weeks. I was terrified. What if it was illegal? What if someone came looking for them? But every time I lay in my basement room listening to the upstairs toilet leak, I thought about that number, 300 bitcoins. Eventually, I convinced myself of one thing. If someone had left that kind of fortune on a computer and tossed it into a recycling bin, maybe they didn't deserve it. Maybe the universe wanted me to have it. So I transferred 1 Bitcoin, just one, to a wallet I created myself. It worked. The coin was mine. I sold it through a shady online marketplace and got just under $850 after fees. It felt like blood money, but it paid 2 months' rent in one click. I remember holding the cash in my hands and trembling. Over the next few months, I moved slowly, 1 coin at a time. I was cautious, paranoid. I changed wallets, used VPNs, researched cold storage. I learned more about blockchain technology in those weeks than I had about anything in my entire life. By the end of the year, I had liquidated just over 100 coins. That was nearly $100,000. I quit the warehouse job. No one asked why. I enrolled in English classes, bought a decent laptop, and found a cheap apartment downtown. I started investing not just in crypto but in myself. I watched lectures on economics, learned how the stock market worked, took a crash course in business management. I was hungry in a new way now. Not for food. For control. The coins kept growing in value. When Bitcoin passed $5,000, then $10,000, my net worth exploded. By then, I still had about 180 coins left, untouched. At $10,000 each, I was sitting on $1.8 million. More money than I could imagine. So I bought a condo. Not a huge one, I didn't want to be flashy. I got a lawyer. Created a shell company. Paid my taxes. I did everything by the book as much as I could. And for a while, I was happy. I made new friends. Real ones. I started dating a woman named Eliza. She was smart. Funny, loved coffee as much as I did. I told her I worked in tech consulting, which wasn't exactly a lie by that point. She didn't ask too many questions. We moved in together. Took trips. Laughed in bed. Planned a future. But you can't build a castle on stolen sand. It started with an email. A strange message landed in an old inbox I hadn't used in years. No subject line. No greeting. Just a single sentence. You have something that doesn't belong to you. I froze. At first, I thought it was spam. Or a scam. But then, 3 minutes later, another message came. This one included a screenshot of the old wallet address from the junk laptop. The one that held the original 300 BTC. I couldn't breathe. That address hadn't been used in years. No way anyone could have connected it to me. But whoever this was, they knew. Somehow. I didn't reply. I deleted the emails, changed my passwords, updated all my security protocols. I even considered moving the rest of the coins, but I didn't. Panic made me clumsy. Fear made me stupid. The messages kept coming. Each more aggressive. Someone wanted those coins back. Or maybe they just wanted to scare me. Either way, it worked. I didn't tell Eliza. I couldn't. What would I say? Hey babe, remember that fortune I never told you how I got? Turns out someone else might want it back. So I lied. I said I was under stress. I stopped sleeping. Stopped laughing. I started watching people on the street, wondering if they were watching me too. Then came the phone call. It was a blocked number. The voice on the other end was calm. Male. Almost polite. Give it back, he said. Or we come take it. Who are you? She asked. He hung up. I tried to trace the number, nothing. I went to the police, but what could I say? Someone's threatening me over money. I may have accidentally stolen from a trash laptop 5 years ago. They told me to call again if I felt in danger. By then, the paranoia had become a second skin. I moved the coins to a hardware wallet and stored it in a safety deposit box under a fake name. I hired a private investigator. He found nothing. But someone knew. Someone was watching. And then Eliza disappeared. I came home one Thursday evening to find the door ajar and the lights off. Eliza was supposed to be home. We were planning to cook together. I remember holding a bag of groceries in my left hand, my phone in the right. I called out her name once. No answer. Something felt wrong. Not broken glass wrong. Not crime scene wrong. But off. The apartment looked untouched. Her shoes were by the door. Her coat was hanging where it always did. But her phone was missing. Her laptop. Her purse. I checked the bathroom, toothbrush gone. Bedroom, drawers open. Clothes missing. She was gone. There was no note. No message. Just absence. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. I texted. Waited. Called her friends. Her parents. No one had heard from her. Not in the last 24 hours. I filed a missing persons report the next day. But I could see the suspicion in the officer's eyes. Boyfriend reports girlfriend missing, no sign of struggle, apartment untouched. No witnesses. They did the paperwork, gave me a card, and said someone would be in touch. Someone was, but not the police. A few days later, I got a letter. Hand-delivered. No return address. Inside was a photo of Eliza. She looked scared. Not hurt. Not harmed. But very clearly not free. Behind her was a plain white wall and a piece of paper taped to it. On it was written, "This is real." There was no demand for ransom. No instructions. No explanation. Just proof. I threw up in the sink. That same night, I got another call from the block number. "We told you. We don't want your life. Just what you took." I begged. I offered to give everything back. Every single coin. He said, "It's not about the money. It's about the principle. But we'll let you choose. The wallet or the girl." I screamed. I cried. I cursed. He hung up. For 3 days, I didn't sleep. I went back to the police, this time with the letter and the photo. They took it more seriously now, filed it as a probable abduction. But they still didn't know about the coins. I couldn't bring myself to explain. I went to the safety deposit box the next morning. The wallet was gone. It had been removed. No record. No explanation. Just an empty box. I demanded answers. The bank manager said it was accessed 2 days earlier by me. They showed me the footage. And there I was. Or someone who looked exactly like me. My clothes. My posture. Even the way I walked. But it wasn't me. I had never been there that day. I'd been in my apartment, watching the walls close in. It didn't matter. The coins were gone. All of them. That night, the calls stopped. The emails stopped. Eliza's phone pinged for the first time in a week, once. In the middle of a highway outside of Ottawa. Then never again. A week later, the police found her. They found her in a wooded area outside Ottawa, near an abandoned gas station. No visible wounds. No signs of assault. Just her, lying in the leaves, eyes open. As if she had fallen asleep while staring up at the branches. The autopsy report said cardiac arrest. No toxins. No trauma. But I knew the truth, someone had scared her to death. Or broken her from the inside. It didn't matter what the papers said. I killed her. Not with my hands. But with my secrets. They never found any suspects. No fingerprints. No usable surveillance. I wasn't even considered a serious person of interest. The coroner insisted there was no evidence of foul play. They buried her 2 weeks later. I stood at the back of the funeral in silence, wearing a coat that didn't fit me anymore. My face unshaven, my soul in ashes. Her mother wouldn't look at me. Her sister cried like the earth had split in two. After the service, I went home and drank until the ceiling blurred. I kept waiting for another call, another threat. But none came. It was over. They got what they wanted. And I had nothing. The months that followed were a blur. I sold the condo. Closed my accounts. Left the city. I lived out of motels, moving every week. I didn't trust anyone. I didn't talk to anyone. The fortune was gone. The woman I loved was gone. But the guilt stayed. I tried to work again, doing odd jobs under fake names. Cash only. No questions. But everything felt empty. Colorless. Like my life had become a waiting room for death. One night, in a small town north of Quebec, I found myself sitting on a frozen bench, staring out over a lake of black ice. It was 2 a.m. The world was silent. And I realized I hadn't heard my own laugh in over a year. I took out my phone. I still had the first photo of Eliza. The one we took on a pier in Prince Edward Island. She was holding a coffee cup, squinting at the sun. I stared at that picture until the screen dimmed. And I whispered, "I'm sorry," into the dark. And then, for a moment, I thought, maybe I could end this. Just walk onto the ice. Let it crack. Let the cold take me. But I didn't. I don't know why. Instead, I started writing. At first, just to pass the time. Then to try to make sense of what happened. Then because I needed to believe her death wouldn't just be another unsolved nothing. I wrote everything, the truth. Every stolen coin, every lie I told. Every mistake I made. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not writing this to clear my name. There is no redemption in this story. Only consequence. But if someone reads this and learns from it, if even one person pauses before chasing easy gold, before building a life on someone else's foundation, then maybe all this suffering has weight. And if they come for me next, let them. I have nothing left to give. This is the end of my story. My name is Amir. And I became a millionaire by accident. But I lost everything on purpose. I left Quebec 2 days after that night by the lake. No destination. Just movement. I crossed into New Brunswick, then Nova Scotia. Drifting from one coastal town to another. Sometimes I cleaned fishing boats for cash. Sometimes I delivered groceries. Most nights I stayed in cheap motels or slept in the back of borrowed vehicles. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I used a fake name, Kareem. Or Hassan. Or James. Whatever fit the mood. I told myself I wasn't running. But I was. Every unfamiliar face looked like a potential enemy. Every parked van felt like a surveillance unit. Every night, I replayed that photo of Eliza taped to the wall in my head. I imagined her eyes asking me one question. Why did you let them win? But I hadn't let them. I had just lost. That was different. Wasn't it? A year passed like fog rolling over a grave. One evening, I found myself working the night shift at a gas station outside Halifax. It was dead quiet. Just the hum of the lights and the occasional raccoon rustling near the dumpsters. I was stocking shelves when a voice behind me said, "You ever heard of a guy named Amir?" My heart turned to ice. I turned slowly. The man was about 50, tall, with a salt and pepper beard and cheap sunglasses. His coat was clean. His boots weren't. He looked like someone who'd seen war and never came back from it. "No," I said. "Doesn't ring a bell." He stared at me for a few long seconds. Then he said, "Funny. You look like him." I laughed too loudly. "Sorry, man. Must be one of those faces." He smiled. But it wasn't friendly. "Yeah," he said. "One of those faces." Then he bought a pack of gum and left. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I quit. It was in a library in Lunenburg that I finally Googled myself again. I hadn't done it in over a year. Just typed in Amir Cryptocurrency Canada. I expected nothing. There had never been headlines about me. But there was something new. A Reddit thread. 3 weeks old. Titled, "Does anyone remember the ghost BTC guy from Ontario?" It was vague. A mix of speculation and conspiracy. Someone had pieced together rumors that a young immigrant had stumbled on a lost Bitcoin fortune, vanished and left behind whispers of corruption, and a girl who died under mysterious circumstances. No names. But the details were too close. The worst part. In the comments, someone wrote, "I know who he is. I saw him in Halifax, working at a station off the 103. He's not a ghost. He's just hiding." They posted a picture. It was blurry. But it was me. They had found me again. I packed up that day and bought a bus ticket west. No destination, just west. Somewhere without ocean, without memories, without fingerprints. Somewhere no one knew Eliza's name. I ended up in Thunder Bay, Northern Ontario. Cold. Quiet. Forgettable. I rented a basement room from a retired mechanic who didn't ask questions. I worked in a junkyard. It felt poetic, tearing apart old machines, stripping them for copper and scrap, like erasing little pieces of forgotten history. I stayed there for 2 years. And for a while it worked. No threats. No messages. Just silence. Until the letter came. There was no stamp. No envelope. Just a single folded sheet slipped under my door. Inside, a photo of me hauling a rusted-out engine block. And a handwritten line. We never stopped watching. The photo didn't scare me anymore. Not like the first time. Fear had grown old and familiar. Like an ache in your bones that you stopped noticing after too long. But something else crept in this time. Resignation. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I didn't even tear up the note. I burned it. Then I sat in the dark for hours, trying to decide what came next. Was this another warning? A test? A final chapter? I walked to the mechanic's garage the next morning and quit. Told him I had to take care of something. He nodded. He'd seen that look before, in veterans, in addicts. In men who buried something they could never dig up again. I didn't pack. I didn't take anything except a worn backpack, a bottle of water, and the photo of Eliza I kept taped inside my journal. I got on the next train headed toward Toronto. If they were going to find me again, then fine. Let them. But this time, I was going to meet them on my own terms. Toronto was louder than I remembered. Harsher. Every corner felt like a reflection of my failure. The streets I used to walk in hope, now haunted by ghosts of myself. I checked into a motel under my real name. It felt like a small act of defiance. Or surrender. Either way, it was honest. That night, I went to the old building where I used to live with Eliza. A new couple lived there now, young, holding hands, eyes full of a future. I stood across the street and watched their lights flicker on. Laughed at the timing. Or fate. Then I walked to a coffee shop where Eliza used to study. I took a seat at the far end. Ordered her favorite drink. Sat alone with it. Didn't drink it. And that's when he sat down. The same man from the gas station. Same sunglasses. Same voice. "You're harder to find than I expected," he said. I didn't answer. He smiled. But not impossible. I looked him in the eye for the first time. "Who are you?" He tilted his head. "Just a messenger." "Whose?" He leaned in. "The ones who made you rich." Silence. Then I said, "You already took the coins. What more do you want?" He looked disappointed. "You think this was about the coins? Then what?" He studied me like a teacher watches a failing student. The coins were the test, Amir. Not the prize. We wanted to see what you'd do. What you'd become. I swallowed. And you failed. I laughed bitterly. "You think I don't know that?" "No," he said. "You don't. Not yet. But you will." He stood. "You'll get a final chance soon," he added. "Be ready." Then he walked out. I didn't leave Toronto after that. Instead, I checked into a long-stay hostel near Kensington Market. I stopped hiding. I used my real name at cafes. I walked during the day. I even applied for a job at a bookstore. The girl at the counter asked if I liked to read. I said, "Not anymore." I didn't tell her why. Every day I waited for something. Another note. A van. A bullet. But weeks passed. Nothing happened. And slowly, I began to believe maybe this was the punishment. Not death. Not torture. Existence. They weren't hunting me anymore. They were watching. Waiting. For what, I didn't know. But I felt it, like static in the bones. Like the pause before lightning. And then one morning, I got a package. No return address. Just my name. Inside, a USB drive. And a note. You wanted the truth. Here it is. The USB drive sat on the desk for hours before I touched it. I stared at it like a bomb, something small that could change everything in an instant. I wanted to throw it away. Pretend it didn't exist. But curiosity has its own gravity. And guilt. Guilt is the fuel that keeps it orbiting your every thought. I plugged it into a borrowed laptop. There was only one file. Confession.mp4. I hovered over it. My fingers trembled. Then I pressed play. The video began with static. Then a face appeared, a man in his 60s, dressed in a plain grey hoodie. His eyes were sharp. Cold. Behind him. A dim office, papers stacked high. Walls covered in old computer parts and surveillance photos. Some of them were of me. He spoke without introduction. You don't know me, Amir. But I've known you for years. I sat forward, breath shallow. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that you were chosen. He paused, as if letting that sink in. 7 years ago, my organization ran a program. We called it Project Dust. A digital test. We injected dormant crypto wallets into the blockchain unmarked. Untraceable, just like lost coins. Each one loaded with anywhere from 10 to 100 Bitcoin. Then we watched. He leaned closer to the camera. Most were picked up by hackers. Some by miners. But a few. By nobodies. People like you. Ordinary men with just enough desperation to make a mistake. My mouth went dry. You weren't lucky, Amir. You were bait. We wanted to see what wealth would do to a man who'd never had anything. Would he save himself? Or destroy everything around him? He smiled thinly. You passed the first stage. You took the money. You didn't ask questions. But when you started making noise, when you tried to change the rules, go public, share knowledge, we had to intervene. My fists clenched. Eliza was never meant to die. That was unfortunate. But in truth, she was never the target. His face turned solemn. You were. Silence. Then. You've been living in the aftermath of your own choices. Amir. But those choices were scripted. You think you were a millionaire by accident. You were a lab rat. And the maze is still going. He leaned in again, his voice colder now. You want justice. You want meaning. Stop looking backward. The final test is still ahead. And if you survive it, we'll be waiting. The screen went black. I sat frozen. My breath caught in my throat. My vision blurred. I wanted to scream at the screen, at the wall, at the sky. At the absurdity of it all. My entire life a test. I staggered outside into the grey chill of Toronto's dawn. I walked until my feet bled in my boots. I walked through alleys, past murals, over bridges. Through the roar of traffic. Until I found myself at the lake's edge. Staring into the grey horizon. I pulled out the photo of Eliza. The edges were worn now, the ink fading. I whispered, I didn't know. A seagull screamed overhead. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running anymore. Back in my room, I opened my journal and began to write. Not for them. Not for revenge. For her. For me. The truth was a cage. But maybe, just maybe, the telling of it could become a key. If I was still being watched, then fine. Let them watch. I would finish this story. And if it brought them to my door, so be it. I was done being afraid. I stayed in Toronto. I told myself it was temporary, but I stopped checking out. I stopped hiding my name. I took the job at the bookstore. Mornings were slow. I shelved titles I'd never read. Watched the city move past the fogged-up windows. On breaks, I wrote, in the back room, in cafes, in the margins of newspapers. The story poured out of me like a confession I hadn't realized I'd been holding in. Eliza. The wallet. The fall. And now, them. I didn't care if anyone believed me. I just needed it out of my head. The city felt alive again. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. But peace is a fragile thing. It only takes a whisper to break it. One cold Thursday morning, I arrived at the bookstore to find the door already open. My coworker, Lena, looked pale. Her hands were shaking. Someone broke in, she said. Nothing had been stolen. No register opened. No vandalism. Just a single book pulled off the shelf and laid open on the front counter. George Orwell's 1984. Inside was a note. Your story ends when we say it ends. I stared at the handwriting. It was the same as the USB note. That night, I found a burner phone in the hallway outside my hostel room. It was ringing. I picked it up. A woman's voice answered. We've read your little memoir. Who are you? You know who we are. What do you want now? To offer you a choice. She paused. You can publish it. Tell the world. It won't change anything, no one will believe you. But it might help you sleep. And if you do, we won't stop you. My chest tightened. But. Just. But, she said, you'll never be safe again. I closed my eyes. And the other choice? Come to Montreal. Tomorrow night. Rue Saint-Aubin. You'll see a door with a blue X. Come inside. No tricks. Just truth. A real one. The line went dead. I didn't sleep. By sunrise, I'd made my choice. I took the earliest train. Montreal was colder than Toronto. Hungrier. Its shadows felt tighter. I found the street. The door with the blue X. I stood in front of it for a long time. Heart punching my ribs, breath hanging in the frozen air. Then I opened it. Darkness. A stairwell. I descended. The basement was concrete and candlelight. In the center, a table, 2 chairs, and a laptop. Across from me sat a woman in a gray coat. Young. Calm. Her eyes didn't blink enough. She gestured for me to sit. I did. She opened the laptop. Turned the screen toward me. It showed a document. The price of gold dust. My story. All of it. Typed, formatted. Complete. Who finished it? Just. You did, she replied. I frowned. What do you want? She looked at me. To help you finish it the right way. She handed me a pen. There's one final paragraph missing. I hesitated. Then I wrote. I wrote until my hands shook. Until the candles burned low. Until the silence felt holy. When I looked up, she was gone. And the room was empty. I left Montreal before dawn. Back in Toronto, I uploaded the manuscript. No password. No firewall. Just there on every free hosting platform I could find. And then I waited. 4 days, nothing. No messages. No van. No shadow at my window. And for the first time, I wondered if it really was over. If I'd passed whatever test they'd built for me. But deep down, I knew. There was still one chapter left. The story went online on a Monday. By Friday, no one cared. There were a few anonymous shares on obscure forums. A handful of comments calling it a cool sci-fi creepypasta. One person asked if it was real. No one answered. No journalists called. No threats came. And I realized something terrifying. They were right. No one believes the truth if it doesn't fit the story they already want. And mine was too ugly, too unbelievable, too ordinary in its descent. I still went to the bookstore every day. I still shelved novels written by men and women who hadn't lived a fraction of what I had, but whose words people actually wanted to hear. One day, Lena asked me why I always looked tired. I just smiled and said, "Bad dreams." She laughed. "Get better ones." It happened on a Tuesday. I woke up to the sound of sirens, far off. The sky outside was bruised with winter. And on my windowsill, resting gently against the glass, was a single gold coin. Just one. Clean. Shining. Impossible. I didn't touch it. I sat and stared at it for hours. And I knew it was never about money. It was never about greed. It was about control. About testing how much a man can carry before he collapses. It was their signature. Their goodbye. Or maybe their hello. That evening, I left the bookstore early. I walked to the lakeshore one last time. Sat on the same bench I had after watching Eliza vanish into the void of my past. And I took out the coin. Held it between two fingers. I thought of my mother. Of Kabul. Of the smell of dust and jasmine. I thought of crossing frozen sidewalks in my first winter here. Of Eliza's laugh in the back of a truck. Of strangers with dead eyes and cryptic promises. Of the boy I had once been. And the man I had become. Then I threw the coin into the lake. Watched it vanish beneath grey water. Gone. That night, I wrote one last page in my journal. If you're reading this, I hope you never find the gold. I hope you never have to choose between truth and survival. But if you do, choose truth. Even if it kills you. I left the journal on my bed. Took nothing with me. I walked across the city. And somewhere, beneath the weight of neon signs and frozen rain, I disappeared. They never found my body. Some said I ran. Some said I finally paid the price. But I think I simply ended. Like a ghost who told his story and finally, at last, was free to fade.